With as little as 3 weeks until the debt ceiling hits, yesterday was a busy day for our nation's leaders beating up on their debt ceiling human shields. First, Treasury Secretary Yellen gave a speech dictating that if the debt ceiling is not raised, meaning if deficits immediately stop, quote, we have to default on something. She immediately defined that something as Social Security and the national debt. In other words, pay us, or we starve grandma, and then we burn it all down. Now, default is a bluff. I've mentioned in previous videos that governments will bend heaven and earth. They will break every law, bend every rule to avoid durably defaulting on debt. Because they know that if they default, that would cut them off from future lending. Nobody would lend them anymore. Meaning, Yellen's repeated default threats are a fear campaign to get financial markets to panic. Keep in mind, Yellen's job is allegedly not to crash financial markets, which might surprise you given what she's been doing to banks. So if the default threat is fake, Yellen's true message boils down to grandma gets it. By the way, Yellen also helpfully noted that Treasury has made literally zero preparations for a debt ceiling because that's how a pro extorts voters. One is reminded of a teenager spending $5,000 on dad's credit card. He asks her to keep it down to $4,000. So she stops eating and calls him from the hospital for a credit limit increase. Not to be outdone on the human shields, Joe Biden's handlers jumped in, put out a tweet warning that if voters are bold enough to want some of their money back, the first things they will cut are, quote, wildland firefighters, national park rangers, and workers who regulate water quality. I've talked about this strategy where governments make cuts as painful as humanly possible. In Washington, it's called the Washington Monument Strategy, or Firemen First, since they like to close national parks and lay off firemen. Biden's people hilariously managed to squeeze both classics into a single tweet while threatening the water supply as a bonus. The only one they missed was school lunches, but perhaps the Twitter character limit saved the children for now. Back in the real world, my colleague E.J. Antoni had an article going through the actual budget numbers, finding that federal revenue so far this year was 2.5 times higher than Yellen's Social Security and debt payments. In fact, it's been a full trillion more than all of the hostages, so Social Security and debt, Medicare, veterans, and yes, school lunches, firemen, and water inspectors. In other words, they could cover all of the essentials with a couple trillion every year for defense and renaming post offices. No default or starving grandmas required. Sadly, however, grandma and the water supply must take one for the team, so no corrupt handout is left behind. Now, of course, a functioning media would call them out on this, and they wouldn't do it. Right, so threatening voters to protect cronies would be a bad look. But then the media has been regime apologists for some time now, and it comes to people like us to get the message out so voters demand more from their leaders. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.